Welcome to Gmat by Physicswala, where we do everything in our ability to help you move closer to a great Gmat score. And in that endeavor, we are going to work on a part of critical reasoning called boldface questions. A lot of people get back to us and they say that this is a question type that we at times struggle with. So let's go ahead and demystify it. And in case we are meeting each other for the first time, my name is Vikrant and I am going to be your personal coach for all things related to verbal in Gmat. Okay, so boldface questions it is. Now, what exactly do we mean by a boldface question? So here is a broad overview of these questions for you. So in these questions, the argument gives you, the author, the examiner gives you a paragraph. That paragraph contains an argument. And two sentences or statements of that argument are highlighted by making them bold, and you are expected to talk about the role played by those two bold parts. In some of the questions, actually, there can be only one bold part as well, but that's quite unusual nowadays. So you need to figure out the role played by the highlighted statements. So what do we really have in an argument? So an argument happens to have a conclusion which is supported by some premises and assumptions, but then assumptions are unstated, so you'll never find them written there, and therefore an assumption can never be highlighted. So an argument can have a conclusion, it can have premises. But then apart from those premises, there are times when we offer some evidence for those premises. So it can contain evidence. It can also go ahead and contain some context. Moreover, the argument that you come across can be a multi-tier argument. So there are times when we use some reasons to arrive at a conclusion, and that conclusion is used further up to support some other conclusion. So there is this chain that forms. Then so very often we may also come across paragraphs that contain an argument and a counter argument, right? So these are the kind of things that we deal with, and that is why at times people hesitate when it comes to boldface questions. But frankly, that is all that is there to it. Any part that has been highlighted is going to be a conclusion, premise, or evidence, or context, or it can be a part of the counter argument, right? That's basically it. And in case of a multi-tier argument, you can even have intermediate conclusions. So it's a fairly limited set that you can look at. So let's go ahead and work on that together. Here is your first question. So what I would advise is that you pause the video right here, answer the question, then come back and join me for a discussion. So let's start. So pause and then come back when you're ready. Welcome back, and let's go ahead and work on this particular question now. So irrespective of which part is given to us in bold, I tend to ignore that. The first thing that I do is I read and figure out the conclusion that the author wants to communicate, express. So here, plant scientists have used genetic engineering on seeds to produce crop plants that are highly resistant to insect damage. Unfortunately offers a contrast. It is used to give the opposite. The seeds themselves are quite expensive, and the plants require more fertilizer and water to grow well than normal ones. Thus, for most farmers, the savings on pesticides would not compensate for the higher seed costs and the cost of additional fertilizer. So this entire part is an argument in itself, where we have given an advantage of genetically engineered seeds, then a disadvantage, and then we are arriving at a conclusion that for farmers, these genetically engineered seeds won't make sense in terms of the costs that are involved. However, now we know there is a contradiction coming in. Since consumer demand for grains, fruits, and vegetables grown without the use of pesticides continues to rise, the use of genetically engineered seeds of this kind is likely to become widespread. Now you notice, this is another argument, and this is the conclusion of this other argument, and that is author's main point. So I can say that this is your main conclusion. Fair enough? And this conclusion and this conclusion, the first argument's conclusion, they happen to be contradictory. And it is very clear that the second boldface is essentially a premise used to support the main conclusion. So why not focus on this and eliminate some of these answer choices? Let's work. So the second is the argument's main conclusion. No, it is not the argument's main conclusion. It is the premise that supports the main conclusion. So A gets ruled out. B, the first, okay, we're just focusing on the second. The second is a state of affairs that the argument denies will be part of that outcome. Does the author deny this? No, he is accepting it. So this is wrong. C, the second acknowledges a consideration that weighs against that prediction. Okay, then the author says the use of genetically engineered seeds of this kind is likely to become widespread. That's a prediction. Now, the second boldface weighs against this prediction or goes on to support this prediction. It goes on to support, right? So even C gets eliminated. D, the second is a consideration that supports the main conclusion. Check, yes. The second provides evidence to support the argument's main conclusion. Yes. So only by focusing on the second boldface, I could eliminate 3 of the answer choices. So now I just need to compare the first half, the first part of D and E, and we know the correct answer. So what does the first part do? It in a way goes on to provide some sort of evidence for a conclusion that the author contradicts. So D says the first provides a certain outcome that the argument seeks to weigh against. Yes. D, the first provides evidence to support the argument's main conclusion. Nah, the first does not support the argument's main conclusion. The first supports a conclusion that the author is going against. So E is very clearly wrong, and therefore we are left with what? Option D, and there you go. So with that, let's dive into our next question. Once again, hit pause and press play when you are ready. Okay, so I hope you're ready to take on this particular question. So let's see, what do we have here? In countries where automobile insurance includes compensation for whiplash injuries sustained in automobile accidents, reports of having suffered such injuries are twice as frequent as they are in countries where whiplash is not covered. So we are talking about 2 countries. There is a country where insurance covers whiplash injuries, and there is a country where insurance does not cover whiplash injury. What is a whiplash injury? See, when you are in a car and the car stops suddenly or changes the direction suddenly, your body will take a while because of momentum to follow that path. So such instances, so when you meet with an accident, what happens? In a frontal collision, the car abruptly stops, but then your body will violently move ahead, right? Or if somebody hits you from a side, your body will once again move violently to a side. So that violent movement can at times lead to injuries. So that sudden violent movement, the injuries caused by that sudden violent movement is referred to as whiplash injuries. So let us say I had a whiplash injury because of which I hurt my back and I require, say, 10 physiotherapy sessions. So in country 1, let's call them country 1 and country 2. In country 1, where the insurance includes compensation for whiplash injuries, I'll be paid for those physiotherapy sessions. In country 2, I will not be paid for these. Now, in country 1, you are paid. Okay, you are compensated. In country 2, you are not compensated. So what the author says is that twice as many people report whiplash injuries in country 1 as compared to country 2. So if there are 100 people who report it here, there are 200 people who report it in country 1. Now let's move on. Some commentators have argued correctly that since there is presently no objective test for whiplash, spurious reports of whiplash injuries cannot be readily identified. So when I say I've hurt my back, there is no objective measure. For example, if I tell you that I have a headache, is there a device that you can plug into me. Now, you can't really plug anything into me, but is there a device that can scan me and figure out whether I actually have a headache or not? No, you'll have to go by what I say. So there is no objective test to determine whether a person has actually suffered a whiplash injury or not. Therefore, when somebody says I have a whiplash injury, even if that person is lying, even if that person is giving you a spurious report, you cannot identify it. So here is one argument. These commentators are, however, wrong to draw the further conclusion. The moment you see this further conclusion, you realize now we are talking about a multi-tier argument. So no objective test for whiplash. So we cannot determine whether whiplash injury is spurious or not. Therefore, all these extra whiplash injuries being reported in country 1, these extra 100, they must be spurious. So premise, conclusion, this conclusion is now used, or this argument is being used to support this next conclusion, that in the countries with the higher rates of reported whiplash injuries, half of the reported cases are spurious. But the author here says that this conclusion is wrong. If they arrive at it, they are going to be wrong. Why? Clearly, in countries where automobile insurance does not include compensation for whiplash, people often have little incentive to report those injuries. So what the author says is that in country 2, there are only 100 reported. In country 1, 200 are reported. So there are some people who are saying that those extra 100 injuries are all fake. The author says no, they are not all fake, because in these countries, more than 100 people do suffer from whiplash injuries, but because their insurance does not cover those injuries, they don't even talk about it. Right? So all the extra 100 are fake is wrong. So let us go ahead and start. What do we see? The first is evidence that has been used to support a conclusion that the argument criticizes. Yeah, I mean, this is a conclusion that the author does go on to criticize, and this entire argument, not just this boldface, but this does act as a foundational premise. So basically what you have here is a premise, which is our first boldface, which arrives at a conclusion, and this conclusion further goes on to support another conclusion, so we'd call it an intermediate conclusion. Okay, so this premise does support this as well indirectly, and this is a conclusion that the author criticizes, although the first intermediate conclusion is the one that the author is okay with. But I'd accept this. The second is that conclusion. Yup. The second is the conclusion that the author criticizes. Absolutely. B, the first is evidence that has been used to support a conclusion that the argument criticizes. Okay. The second is the position that the argument defends. No, the second is not a position that the argument defends. The second is a position that argument argues against, where the author very clearly calls it wrong. Let's just focus on the second. I think that's shorter. It will hopefully speed up the process for us. The second is the position that the argument defends. No. The second is the position that the argument opposes. Yes. The second is the conclusion that has been drawn on the basis of that claim. No, the argument goes on to oppose it. So we can rule it out. So we're basically comparing A with D. So let's check the first half now. The first is an intermediate conclusion that has been used to support a conclusion that the argument defends. Okay, two problems. The first is not the intermediate conclusion. The first is the premise for the intermediate conclusion. Number two is used to support a conclusion that the argument defends. No, the argument is not defending the conclusion. It is going against it. So D can also be eliminated, and thus our best answer is going to be option A. So in multi-tier arguments, there are times when we may have these issues, but to go. So with that, let's dive into one more question in this session. So by now you're trained, right? You'll hit pause and then you'll join me when you're ready. Go ahead. Okay, ready to discuss? So let's go. Since it has become known that several of a bank's top executives have been buying shares in their own bank, the bank's depositors who had been worried by rumors that the bank faced impending financial collapse have been greatly relieved. Oh, so there were people who thought that, oh my God, this bank is no longer sound, it can collapse. But then they got to know that a lot of top executives of that bank are buying shares of their bank. Now, typically, when you buy the stock of a company, what does it prove? It proves that you trust that company, right? It proves that you're willing to put your own money to get a piece of the ownership. So you must trust that the organization is going to do well. So when people heard this, they were greatly relieved. The reason that since top executives evidently have faith in the bank's financial soundness, those worrisome rumors must be false. So they reason that, okay, if they have shown faith, the rumors must be false. So now check, those worrisome rumors must be false. Why? On what basis are we saying this? Since top executives evidently have faith in the bank's financial soundness. So this is basically acting as a premise for this conclusion. They might well be over optimistic. When people say those rumors must be false, when you say they might well be over optimistic, that's a polite way of saying these guys are wrong. So the author is going against this conclusion. This is his basic stance. However, why they might be wrong? Since corporate executives have sometimes bought shares in their own company in a calculated attempt to dispel negative rumors. There are times when they buy it so that those negative rumors go away. So this is the author's main conclusion. Let us check. Let's start with the second one. The second is a conclusion drawn on the basis of that claim. The first is a claim, the second is a conclusion drawn on that claim. No, they are contradictory. So this part can be ruled out. B, the second is that, okay, now since we have these pronouns, let's just read it together. The first is an objection that has been raised against a position defended in the argument. All right. The first is an objection that has been raised against a position defended in the argument. The second is that position. Now, the second is the position that is defended, yes, but is first an objection to this? No, it is not exactly an objection that has been raised against this. It is a piece of evidence that has been brought in to support this conclusion. It is not raised against this. It's only when the author saw this argument that he says that their conclusion is wrong. So this is anyway stated prior to what the author has said, and therefore we can eliminate B. The first is evidence that has been used to support an explanation that the argument challenges. The second is that explanation. Is it an explanation? Is C an explanation? Let's see if we need to dig deep into that. So let's keep it in running. D, the first is evidence that has been used to support an explanation that the argument challenges. Identical. The second is a competing explanation that the argument favors. Even better. Now you notice the first half is more or less the same, right? The second half says the first is evidence that has been used to support an explanation that the argument challenges. The second is that explanation. Now, if you look at this, is the second part the explanation that the argument challenges? No, the second part is not the explanation that the argument challenges. The second part is the explanation that the argument accepts. So this part is absolutely incorrect. We can rule it out. So D is definitely better. E, the first provides evidence to support an explanation that the argument favors. It is supporting this fact that the rumors must be false. Does the author favor it? No, he does not. He is against it. So even E gets eliminated, and therefore the best answer choice for us is option D. So here you go. A session where we went ahead and worked on 3 high quality boldface questions. I hope that gave you some additional insights. In case you have more questions, you can get in touch with me by being a part of this particular group. And before I sign out for the day, here is something that I want to leave you with. No excuses, just action. So all that you and I can go on to do is act. And those actions are obviously going to help us in getting the results that we definitely want. Okay, so just show up for work every day, and I'm very confident that with the right kind of guidance, you would definitely get great results. So that's it from me for this particular session. I'll see you in the next one.